Hello, 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 everyone. Hello. Welcome to Tuesday's Twitch and Stitch. I'm here. As predicted, I feel a little bit out of sorts. It is that time, the time of convention crunch. I'm not really crunching in the sort of traditional sense, in that I don't have like scads of costumes I'm trying to put together at the last moment. When it comes to TusCon, I also work behind the scenes at this convention, so I'm also working on programming and that sort of thing, and that kind of gets more into the con crunch. It's a lot of logistics. We bring in our wonderful iron tailor, or iron couturier, as I like to say, the fancy title for the game. And so I'm gathering all of the supplies and things to pack in for that event. I'm so excited for it. Hello, everyone. I see Phyllis and Alicia and Bess and Joanne. Thank you, my darlings. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I do have a bit of sewing I am doing before TusCon. Mostly I'm doing some repairs and things, but I'm making a very special little gift for a friend that has to go with someone who's coming to the convention, because this friend lives out of the country, and this handing it off to a person going to visit her is the very best way to get it to her in the most efficient time frame. And so I'm working on that thing. If you've been on the Discord, you've seen some previews of this particular project. I have been filming some of the process, at least the hand dyeing, and I'm going to be putting together a little discussion of hand dyeing and this whole experience for Patreon, because it's not something I do very often, although done quite a bit of hand dyeing this year. I love to dye fabric, and I've gotten really into doing this ombre dyeing. So I thought it'd be really fun to share more about that in more depth. But also, hello, Cheshire. Hello, my friend. So this is what I'm mostly going to be working on tonight whilst we chat. And it's not a super exciting project in some ways, and sewing is not a huge part of this project, but it's a little bit of the project. So I wanted to give you a little preview. I've made this incredible bit of silk for a scarf, and so you can see I did a little bit of an ombre dye with a little bit of tie dyeing in there as well, so that there'd be some hints of the other colors throughout the pattern. I'm pleased with how it turned out. Oh my gosh. So so Alicia says, clearly I need to be in bed early. When I started saying hello, she was picturing the romper room mirror. I don't know, maybe that's the energy I was bringing tonight, honestly. So, all right, this is a little bit tricksy. The fabric is very delicate. It's a silk habitai, and you can see it's so delicate, it's almost entirely sheer. It's just a very ephemeral, soft, beautiful bit of fabric. I get my silk habitai from Dharma Trading. They're a wonderful resource for dyeing supplies. I also like Jacquard. They also have some wonderful supplies, but I've been using Dharma almost the entire time I've been doing hand dyeing. Like many folks, I started out with RIT dye, and I am not here to like bemoan RIT or say anything terrible about RIT. RIT is also a very wonderful resource, and they have the advantage of being much more accessible and a little bit of a lower standard of entry for hand dyeing. You don't need as many chemicals and supplies, in other words. And RIT has a fantastic sort of guide on their website for ways to blend their basic dyes to come up with a wider range of colors. That is a resource I think is tremendous. But when I want to do something really special, when I'm planning my project in advance, when I want the best effect I can get, I go to Dharma Trading. They have wonderful tutorials for how to do dyeing. They also sell undyed fabric, just plain unbleached fabric that you can dye, and the prices are really good. So that's where I tend to get my sort of plain Jane fabrics, which I then turn into much less plain Jane. And this habitat is luscious. It's not only does it have this like incredibly soft, look at that drape, it's so soft, but it has the most beautiful hand. It's like so lovely against the skin. I know this will feel really good wrapped around my friend's neck or head or wherever she chooses to wear it. I've made her a giant square scarf. It's really much too big, probably, but also cutting into the habitat is very difficult because it is so ephemeral. It moves so much that cutting it down much more than I did was going to be a nightmare. So I decided to stick with a large square. You can do so many things with a large square scarf. You can do a neck wrap, you can do a head wrap, you can make a top out of it, you can do a belt out of it. I decided that this made it the most flexible it could be, and also saved me some sanity points. So did I need to square the edges? All right, this is a great question, Phyllis. So normally the answer would be yes, you need to square the edges of your square to get it really nice. And to be fully transparent, that is what I endeavored to do. I totally endeavored to square the edges of this fabric. Now, the selvages were nice and straight. And the one cut edge that came from Dharma was nice and square. But when I went to cut my one cut that I needed to make, it took me 45 minutes to even get close to getting it laid out appropriately. So to be honest, I don't think that I was able to really square that edge of it very well because I struggled just to get a clean cut on it at all. The fabric is incredibly woody and it was just going everywhere on me. And even though I have a fairly large cutting table, I was still running into lots of challenges. So I'd say it's square-ish on that end, but unideal. But, you know, sometimes you have to deal with imperfections and hope the overall impact is sufficient that no one notices that your corners are not 100% 90-degree angles. Yeah, oh, I love this. Beth says super thin fabric makes scarves that can't be too big. I agree. This is so, look, this is a 44-inch square of fabric, and which is fairly large. Like a 36-inch square is a more standard square of size for a scarf. I've seen them very small to very large. This is on the larger size for a scarf, but when I fold it down, it's so, I'll use this, it's so thin that the whole thing easily comes through my ring. And so it's very, very delicate. Oh my gosh. Can you pull a thread in habitat like you do in linen? Bess, I needed you to ask me that question last night. Yes, probably. I feel so foolish. That might have been the better solution to trying to cut it, honestly. Although pulling a thread can be very fussy, sometimes with fabric like this, it is the right choice. And honestly, as we're discussing it, I'm like, oh, yes, that would have gotten me closer to square. This was so hard to cut. It was so hard to cut, but it also was a really good preview of what was going to work and what was not going to work with finishing the fabric. So initially, I thought I was going to run this bit of silk through my sewing machine and use my rolled hem foot to roll the edge on the machine. But it's so delicate, it's so thin, it's so woody. I determined that that was not going to function. So even though it's much more time consuming, I started hand stitching, hand rolling the hem. So that's what I'm going to mostly talk about this evening, is doing a hand rolled hem. This is like, honestly, the stitch you do is very simple. It's a very easy stitch. It is still kind of a tricky bit of a process, especially with a sheer fabric like this. So last night it took me a little bit over an hour, not much, so probably like an hour and 15 minutes to hand sew about 44 inches of silk into my rolled hem. It hasn't been steamed yet. It does need to be steamed. This is the wrong side of that rolled hem. It's just a little, you can see some of my stitches, not too bad, but it needs a little steam that will help clean it up. This is what it looks like from the wrong side, or rather from the right side. So it's a nice little finish. It's very like, this is a fussy decision to make about any little project, but sometimes your fabric is so delicate that the only option that's not going to drive you wild is to do something by hand. And that is where I'm at with this fabric. Oh my gosh. So, Archon Peacock says, finding the Goldilocks amount of weights is very trying. Too many, it deforms. Too little, it wiggles like a child needing a restroom. Yes, look, trying to get this spread out and like true on the cutting board, putting weights on it. It really was like every time I dropped a weight on the fabric, it moved. It was very trying. So Tess's suggestion of pulling a thread is a really good one. I'm not quick with that. I have to really work at it to do a pulled thread. But it works beautifully well. And I do think you could do that with this. The threads are very fine. So I would probably need to have daylight, the brightest light I possibly can, to be honest. I might actually need, this is because I'm middle-aged and my eyes are not what they once were, but I might actually need a magnifying glass to see the threads in this because they are so fine. And I would definitely need tweezers to pull that thread, at least get it started. So, but other than that, it honestly probably would have been the better solution. So that said, my corner looks relatively square. I do have a little thread there that needs to be clipped. So I was able to do this with just two lengths of thread, which is not too bad. You don't want to make your thread too long when you're doing this kind of hand sewing because it will get tangled and that's a mess. I have a couple of places where I need to trim away some of the fabric that did not quite roll up because my cutting was a bit ragged in those places, so I have to trim away. Oh, that this is lovely. Scone Mistress, hello, good evening. The Hobbit is out for a drive with her papa to go do her civic duty, or at least learn about doing her civic duty and drop off their mail in ballots. I'm so happy you can be here. Also, well done you doing your mailing, doing your ballots. It's so important. I also am allowed to vote, and I also did my civic duty and voted. So very exciting. You know, I feel strongly that the suffragists did not work that hard for me not to vote, and so I'm very dedicated to voting. So here we are. All right, my darling. So let's talk a little bit about doing this kind of hem. A rolled hem is extremely narrow, so normally you're folding over, pressing over ideally, about 1/8 of an inch of fabric to start. It's very narrow. Now this fabric, again, it's so beautiful and it absolutely takes a press extremely well. What it does not like to do is press up a straight edge, I found. So I'm going to be sort of finger pressing this as I go and then doing my stitches. So I'm just rolling over about 1/8 of an inch of fabric to get started. For this, I'm going to be using one of my sharpest needles possible, very tiny little needles. And I'm also going to be using my wonderful tried and true Thread Heaven. It's essential for this project. Now, what I don't have to use, or at least I personally don't need to use for this, is a thimble necessarily. The fabric is, the needle goes right through it like butter. It's not a very demanding fabric in that regard. But I do need my full wits about me, which means that in my case, I feel that I actually need to have the feel of my fingertips for doing this particular project. So I can really make certain that I am sewing exactly where I mean to be. It's kind of, you know, some people might be like, well, you should still use your thimble for that. But it's not really harming my fingers. I don't notice it causing me a lot of pain and suffering. And so this way I get a little bit more control over the needle. So, all right, there are lots of options here. If you're feeling very, let's say, that you need the most delicate of needles, I have these gorgeous, look at how tiny they are. They're very small, extremely sharp. They work very well in this delicate fabric. The needle, the eye is tiny. I'm not certain I could really see that eye to thread it even before my eyesight was changed by the ravages of middle age. So these are from a wonderful French company that no longer imports their sewing needles, but I certainly love them. And so I treasure what I have because I can't get any more of them. I also really, look, I don't do a lot of hand sewing. I don't demo a lot of hand sewing. In fact, I tend to be somebody who's going to show you the ways to do things without hand sewing because it's pragmatic, it's faster, it's easier on your hands. But I actually do really love to hand sew, and that's where I got my start with all of this, was by learning to hand sew. And for some things, you just have to be able to, that's the best way. So you have to find the best way for you in order to do that hand sewing. So I also really love Richard Hemming and Sons needles. I buy their needles a lot for any hand sewing. They're pretty much exclusively what I use for millinery. Not this size, though. I use a much larger size for millinery. Those needles are quite large with a large eye. They're easier to thread, all of that. These are called sharps, and there's a range of sizes in here. So they're a little bit less twee than the other needles, and so they're a little bit easier to see, and you have a bit more leverage with the length of your needle. So whenever you are doing hand sewing, the length of the needle gives you leverage for working in the fabric. And when you're working with heavier weight, harder, thicker things, projects that have a lot of layers, you usually want a bit more length to your needle. This is very delicate fabric. It's practically sheer. It's like working with a cloud, to be honest, which is part of the challenge. And so I don't need super heavy duty needles to get through this. I just need something extremely sharp so that it doesn't leave a very big stitch when I take my stitch. Ooh, Argent Peacock says she'll be heading north after the holidays. So if I want more French needles, I can have her look for them. I will do that. I will do that. I will let you know. And thank you. Cheshire says the fingers are sacred. The fingers are very important for sewing. It's true. We've got to preserve them. So because this is an ombre, it means there's this section in the middle that's much lighter color. I'm not switching threads as I go through. I'm just using the same beautiful sort of sapphire blue thread for the whole thing. I'm using a single thread for this, which is again another one of those, like, we're working with very delicate fabric decisions. Because the fabric is so fine, a double thread might actually be too bulky. So here I am using my single thread. It means I have to be much more careful with my stitching. So when you are doing sort of single thread sewing like this, you want to thread your needle and leave yourself a very long tail out one side, and then a somewhat shorter tail out the other side, although the shorter tail should still be fairly long so that your needle does not come unthreaded while you're working. I usually stitch in a little knot for something delicate like this rather than knotting at the end of my thread. This is all because the fabric is so sheer and so fine. The other trick I have is I'm using a needle threader. This is pretty essential for doing this because the eye of the needle is so small that I can't really see the eye of the needle. If I try and thread it with just my eyes and my spectacles, I will make myself weep. Now I'm going to lubricate my threads very thoroughly. Honestly, there are lots of circumstances in life in which you want to moisturize things or lubricate things, and sewing is one of those, surprisingly. Now, when I was first learning to do hand sewing, my grandmama did not take me aside and hand me a little, knob of beeswax. She just gave me some fabric, was like, all right, sew on 10 million buttons and we'll come back to you. So it wasn't until I was older that I discovered how much easier my hand sewing could be if I just went in and coated my thread with a little something to help it slide better through the fiber. Beeswax works beautifully. This is very nice. It will leave no marks. It will be very invisible on my fabric. So it's perfect for this particular fabric and this particular project. This is called Thread Heaven. It's not made anymore, but you can get a very similar product called Thread Magic. So the next thing, I have to make certain that I am sewing my hem in the same direction as I did the other side. Very important. Okay. There are, of course, tutorials and all sorts of things out there taking you through how to do this. But essentially, I'm going to do like a little zigzag stitch across my fabric, and I'll do like 5-ish stitches, and then I'll pull my thread, and magically the rolled hem will begin to form. So let me see if I'm going to get started, and then I'll see if I can bring you in so you can see a little bit of the stitching. But I feel like because it's a little bit fussy to get started, this part I need to do without any camera obscuring my view. So I'm just going to put the tiniest of tiny knots in. And then it's a lot about catching like 1 or 2 threads. It's so delicate. Once I get my rhythm, it goes pretty fast too. I mean, an hour is not nothing, right? That's a long time to spend on 44 inches of fabric. But compared to doing one of my bustle skirt hems by hand, an hour is really fast. And it was faster than I expected it to be honest. So I popped on a little something to watch in the background, and watch is in quotes because I was mostly just listening whilst I stitched. I couldn't fully engage with it with my eyes because they were on the sewing. I also have to sort of like mentally count my stitches. So Cheshire says, I have so far not figured out how to sew a straight line unless it's leather. Well, if you're doing it by hand, it's practice, I suppose. Also, it has a lot to do with preparing the surface. So if I have pressed in my edge, I automatically have a straight edge as a guide to help me get going on my journey to making a straight enough seam. But a lot of it really is, I think, just practice. I've done it so much that I just visually am used to finding a straight enough path forward on my stitching. All right, so a thing I took to doing last night as I was working on this is that when I was done with my 5 stitches, I'd stick my needle in the silicone so it doesn't disappear on me, because the needles are very small and they could so easily, fall onto the table and I'd never find them again. All right, so I've done my 5 stitches and going to grab my little thread here and then I pull that thread, and that causes the hem to just turn over and roll like that. So it's pretty slick. It works pretty well. It's a tried and true method, a historical method, but also it's a little fussy. I think, let's see here. I don't think you're going to be able to even see me taking these stitches necessarily. The thread's a really good match for the fabric. And so let me see here. I probably cannot sew fast enough to get into a truly light portion of the fabric. So, okay. So basically, I'm catching a thread here at the bottom, right under the fold, and then I come at an angle and I catch a thread at the top of the fold. And I do that in a little zigzag manner for about 5 stitches. And I really am just catching 1 or 2 threads. I need to catch the threads of the fabric in order to have my stitches hold, but I don't want to catch too many threads or my stitches will be really obvious. The faster I go, the easier it is to catch too many threads. So I'm taking my time, paying attention, and using my fingers to kind of feel my way along so that I feel the little prick of the needle, and that lets me know whether or not I've gone all the way through the fabric. I've actually caught some threads, or I'm just sort of like wafting by the fabric. All right. I do kind of count my stitches, but also the fabric tells me a little bit when it's ready for me to do the thing. It starts to a little bit roll on its own. So that's usually my sign. It's time to pull the stitches. I don't think you want to do an endless number of stitches because tension is key here. And so if you go like 20 stitches, you might make it too tight, and then it's hard to do the magical thing of pulling the thread. This is a perfect way to describe it. Bess says she found that when sewing on a machine, it's easier to get a straight line if she just gets out of the way. If she tries too hard to make sure the line she's stitching is straight, she makes it worse. Yes, I agree with that. Also, I think one of the things I've done in terms of like machine sewing is I treat it a little bit like dancing. I find a point that I want to line things up with, and I just keep my fabric edge lined up with that point. And so that helps me sew my stitches relatively straight. You can do things like take a bit of masking tape or painter's tape and tape it over the top of your machine next to your presser foot to give yourself a guide. There are these little magnetic guides that are available that will, stick onto the top of that part of the machine that's near your presser foot. Those are like pretty good, although if you have thick enough fabric or you're sewing with enough force, you can move that magnet around a little bit, I found. So the tape can be a better guide. Oh, good night, Arjun Peacock. It's so good to have you here for a little bit. Good luck with the holiday push. Retail and holidays, that is its own kind of nightmare scenario. Mm. Oh my gosh. So I like Tess's description of sort of getting out of your own way a little bit. Try not. There's some parts with sewing that are a little bit of like try not to overthink it, and try and just practice the motion of doing a thing, because there's a bit of muscle memory that you have to develop. Sewing is equal parts being able to do the engineering of the setup and an art of figuring out the body mechanics and letting your body learn that by feel until it is ingrained in you. So sometimes it's just like doing it over and over again until it is in your bones. At least that has been my experience. I like this. Joanne says, I find the magnet gets in the way of the pins. She has to pull them out way earlier if she uses the magnets. Yes, absolutely. I found that as well. I have the magnet guides. I have tried it out for a few things, but I usually come back to finding a point on the sewing machine that is my guide. So usually I use some part of the presser foot relative to the fabric, and that helps me stay organized. Or I use a bit of masking tape, to be honest. I found those to be a bit more reliable. But like many of things, this is about personal preference and finding the tool that works for you personally as a sewist. So just because that works better for me does not mean it's the ultimate right answer. Right. I do love this part where the roll just rolls under. It's kind of magical. So, but also in this time we've been talking, this is how much I've stitched, all right? So, and I've been stitching not quite nonstop, but I have been stitching pretty nonstop. So this is very slow going. All right, I'm going to see. The problem is, of course, I would choose to do this on something extremely dark with a very dark thread. It's not the ideal for demonstration purposes. But let's see if I can at least do a handful of stitches so you can see the actual layout and motion of the thing. You can also see, look, this is why it needs to press, because it kind of wants to like gather up on itself. And some of that has to do with the habitat itself being just kind of springy. So, and some of it is the motion of the needle. So I just need a little steam in order to like sort of smooth that out. All right. Ooh. Oh, that's fun. So Beth says quilters have a great thing where you put a little bar on your needle holder thing. So you have an edge to follow, even if it's wider than your foot or covering your machine floor, table, what have you. Oh my gosh. Yes, that's so handy. Also, look, legitimately, I've been having the worst case of brain fog, perimenopausal brain fog today. Words, thoughts, everything is very difficult. So I relate to that. All right, let's see here. what I can do to make this a little bit more visible. Well, just put the interrogation light on. That should help. All right, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to see if I can like bring the camera close enough so that I can show you a handful of stitches. I'm not going to do this whole thing like that because we'll all be dreadfully bored. Okay. This is about as low as I can take the camera effectively and still have room under it for my hands. Okay. All right. And this is one of those places where if we were in a class, a workshop, and Cindy Joy was here, I would be asking Cindy, can you tell me if you can see it? Is it in the frame? All right, so I've got my little fold here, and I'm going to take my needle, here's the edge of the fabric. So just under the edge of the fabric, I'm going to grab like just a couple of threads with my needle. And then I go at an angle and I come up here to the folded edge and I grab just a couple of threads that way. I'm so happy you all cannot see what I'm doing in order to see what I'm stitching and also check that it's visible in the camera. There we go. All right, and then I repeat that. Grab a couple of threads underneath the raw edge. I go at an angle and I grab a couple of threads from the folded edge. Oh, of course, it decided to tangle. Hello, not helpful. What are we doing? Look at that terrible tangle. Ugh. It's because I'm doing all of this weird nonsense. The thread has decided to torment me. All right. I'm so happy I managed to untangle that. All right, and I keep going. Try not to pull too hard. I pull very gently, mostly because I don't want to tangle, but also I'm trying not to deform the fabric as I go. And once I've got my 5-ish stitches in place, then I pull my thread and it rolls right like so. And then, you know, it just really needs a steam because it all wants to sort of spring up together until I've steamed it. Could I move? My gosh. Did I get it more into the center? To be honest, when I have the camera at that angle, I cannot see your comments at all. So let me know if you were able to eventually see the stitches. I kept trying to move it into the center of the frame, but I was looking like this, looking up at your comments, trying to see the screen and make sure I was centered, and sewing like this, the most absurd thing. Okay, Phyllis saw it. Good. Thank you. We may have to repeat this sometime, or I'll try and do a normal video during a workshop when I can really make certain everyone can see it. So that however is the process, and it's one of those things where I'm like, well, I can write about it, I can talk you through it, but sometimes you just need to see the thing in action. And really, I know for the most part none of us are going to be doing countless rolled hems, but sometimes you have a very sheer, very delicate fabric like this, and you need a hem on it. You can't melt it, it's not synthetic, so you can't go in and just melt it with fire, which you could do with a polyester chiffon. Gently, carefully. You don't want to melt more than you're intending, but that is one of the advantages. Now, you can use fire with silk to do a little finish. I used some flame, some candles, to burn the edge of the silk habitai jabot. I made the grand arbiter to give it a sort of flamey edge finish. Silk and cotton burn differently, and so when you burn silk, it kind of seals the edge a little bit, which means you can also use a hot knife with silk in some circumstances. I don't recommend that for all things, to be honest. Oh, yes, I did hang up the print. Yes. Yes, I did hanging it up. Yes, it is. It's behind me. There it is. Thank you. Yeah, it's my nice little corner of nonsense. I love that little corner of art and things. Thank you very much. I love to be I love my art. I love it hanging up and visible in the house. And so I get it up a little bit at a time as I'm able. So, but this is my particular corner because it's where I hang out with all of you at the cutting table, and so I like it to be a little bit more beautiful with art and also books and my award back there as a reminder that I won one. So the reminders for me, by the way, I'm the one who forgets, no one else forgets. So yeah, thank you, Scone Mistress. I love that art. It's so beautiful. It's been an age, hasn't it, though? So yes, anyway, hand sewing is tricky, I find, in terms of finding a way to show it to all of you so that you can really see what I'm doing with my hands, and so that I can see what I'm sewing, in order that I'm not making a lot of weird mistakes. I suspect that if I had a more powerful camera that I could set up to zoom in without having to physically move it closer and have it practically on top of my hands, that would really help. But that's not what's going on here. So we just make do with what we have. And look at that. I do think it looks really beautiful as it's going along. So, and it does speed up for me a slight bit as I kind of develop my rhythm again. Oh, yes, Scar Mistress has to go manage the chaos of children and kitties. Oh my gosh, their new kitten, Yavanna, who's so beautiful, will eat anything left unattended on the counter. She was eating fried rice earlier. There are worse things. Although, if the rice has garlic or onion in it, you do have to be really careful. Those are not good for kitties. Shrimp is also not good for kitties, too much iodine. So I had to learn all of these things when one of my beloved pets had cancer, and I had to make his food for him in order to get through that experience. So that was a long, long, long time ago, however, many years. Oh my gosh. Avocado is bad for kitties. I didn't know that, Joanne. And you love avos. I love avocado too. Oh my gosh. I don't always have avocado in my kitchen, but I frequently have avocado in the kitchen that I use in various and sundry ways. I just made my first batch of chili of the season. And I like to put a cut up avocado on top of that. So high in fiber and other things that are good for you. Dear old avocados. Here we go. I do think this one is going better than last night's. So yesterday I tried to really press the edge under and do all the right things in that way. And today I'm just like finger pressing that 1/8 inch over, and it's working better than the pressed edge using my iron. But I think that's because the fabric is so delicate that I just struggled to press up that 1/8 of an inch. So I'm eyeballing it all right. I'm not certain that that's like a good starting point if you are not able to eyeball 1/8 of an inch. It might be something you wait to do until you've had some practice eyeballing. But it is working out very well for this particular project. I love this. Joanne says the doctor once told her husband Jake that as good as avos are, people don't eat one a day. He said Jake said, you haven't met my wife. Also, they haven't met me. During part of the year when avocados are very available here, I eat almost one a day because they are very high in fiber and high in flavor and high in other good things. I think like magnesium or something. But for me, it's really, this could be indelicate, but it's about getting that additional fiber into my diet always. I'm very, very careful. I never want to go back to the hospital again. I don't ever want to be that close to dying from essentially a medieval ailment again. And so I do everything that I was told to do. I'm very dedicated. And so part of that is making certain I have a fiber-rich diet. And avocados are just a wonderful way to make that happen. Much more fun than adding, I don't know, psyllium fiber to everything. So, oh, yes, I love this. Beth says, I have been known to eat my weight in avocados, in guacamole. Avocados never last long in her house. They are good on or in so many things. Yes, absolutely. I I love them. I love them beyond just avocado toast, although that is a wonderful little treat in the morning. I really like them on things like salads and chili and sort of like add a little bit of uh, love to my meal, as it were. I like to get the sort of medium-sized avocados because once I cut that avocado, I'm going to eat the entire thing. So the large avocados are a bit much, although there is this way of like baking an egg inside an avocado half where the seed would go. So that is really nice with a large avocado. So delicious. Also, you can do this like dessert with them with a little bit of drizzled caramel that is surprisingly delightful. Ooh, shrimp avocado Caesar salad. That sounds so lovely. I I did salmon avocado Caesar salad for luncheon today. So very similar vibe. Yeah. Not that I'm, you know, that makes me sound very like conscientious in some ways that I'm not, but I like salad for lunch because it's easy and light and quick. And even though I work at home and I work for myself, um, I don't like to take a lot of time to make lunch. So I like something really quick and easy. Look at that. We've got, oh my gosh, we've stitched, and I say we, a whole 17 inches. Very exciting. A little bit more than a foot. Um, oh my gosh. Yes. Also, that just a spoon is totally valid. Comes in its own little ball too. I love that. Um, Yeah, yes. It Cheshire says they like just spooning it right into their mouth, so no need for any other vehicles of digestion. Yeah, no. Look, they're wonderful. This is unbeknownst to us. Not only do we love tea and cheekiness, we love avocados. Mm. So, and I live in a place where it's usually quite easy to get nice avocados. I feel very fortunate in that regard. When I was growing up, my grandmama and my aunties were obsessed with avocados. They kept trying to grow them, even though we lived in distinctly the wrong environment for avocados. But, hope springs eternal. There were many avocado pits in little pots of water, um, trying to start life in a cold climate, or at least a cooler climate. They were very game, but they never survived. Poor things. Oh, I have not had fried avocado, and now I wish to. Um, Also good as a cold pizza topping. All right. No, you're definitely like selling me on some new ways to enjoy my avocados in my life. I'm excited. Thank you so much. I'm going to try these things out. This sounds wonderful. This isn't a cooking channel, but we do love our food and we do like to talk about our food. My gosh, I just really, this is time consuming, but I love how it's turning out. It's totally worth the effort. I wouldn't do this for everything, though. Absolutely. Like, please know, first of all, this is a very special gift from someone for someone that I love dearly, and I want it to be very nice. I might be doing a different kind of present otherwise. Um, and so the hand dyeing in and of itself is quite a commitment. So I did a slightly different process than the last bit of ombre dyeing that I did, and I probably would do my previous version again because it was a bit. I felt like my results were more predictable, but when I discovered that I was going with something that was going to be unpredictable, I just leaned into that and embraced like a little bit of a more organic feeling to the project. So the ombre is less of a straight line and it's more of a curvy experience. It's totally beautiful. I think it looks a bit like the Northern Lights. So I have a smaller bit. I'll probably make a cravat or something out of this, but you can see, I think, how it kind of has that Northern Light vibe, especially if I handle it like this. Yeah, anyway, I'm like obsessed, and it's so lightweight. This takes up almost no room whatsoever. Does not go with my outfit tonight, but you know, there we go. I love scarves. I have a problem. I have 2 drawers in my bureau dedicated simply to scarves. Oh, thank you. I love this color. So it's sapphire blue is the darkest color. And then I used a lilac to start. So it's a sort of very soft lavender blue to blue shift. And I love how that turned out. And also in some places, the two interact to give this kind of beautiful reddish hue, where I did a little bit of tie-dye on it. So yeah, it turned out kind of amazing. But it's one of the acid dyes from Dharma. So if you are someone who wants to get into fabric dyeing, usually for silk, I use the acid dyes that are specifically engineered to work with the proteins in silk fibers. And it takes a lot of the pain and suffering out of the experience. I will add that of all the fabrics I've dyed, silk is the easiest to dye. And I know that seems like very sort of surprising or unintuitive. The first time I dyed silk, I expected it to be kind of fussy, but I forgot the science of silk. And the thing is that all of these little threads in silk act like veins and they soak up the dye. And it just spreads beautifully into the fabric. It's very receptive to dye. It takes many fewer chemicals to make it happen than dyeing cotton or linen. Not that those are like super intensive, but they take a bit more chemicals. Polyester and like the synthetics can be really hard to dye. I love this. Cheshire goes, I can't afford any more hobbies. That is very fair. But if you are ever in a situation where you're like, I cannot get the color I want, what am I going to do? You are around a bunch of people who know how to dye fabric and can talk you through doing a very cheap and quick setup for doing some dyeing. It doesn't have to become an entire hobby to be sometimes a useful skill to have in your arsenal of garment making. So I would say these days I do my utmost to create projects for myself that are not going to require me to do a bunch of dyeing, but sometimes it's the only choice. And in this case, the hand dyeing is part of the gift. So I wanted to make this beautiful ombre, and it's two of this person's favorite colors blended together. And so I wasn't necessarily going to get that at a shop, but also I can put a lot of very fancy details into this in a way that I could not otherwise afford to do. So, but yes, I try to limit the amount of hand dyeing I do. And also I discovered, a few years ago, I think it was in, oh gosh, might have been in 2017, 2016, something like that, that I have to choose when I'm dyeing fabric here very carefully, because I almost gave myself heat stroke doing a very massive dyeing project. Most of my dyeing I do out of doors where there's plenty of ventilation, especially the bigger projects when I'm doing like 12 or 15 yards of fabric and I need a lot of space and I'm going to make a lot of mess. I do that outdoors and I have like a little setup for that. But after April, it turns out it's no longer very feasible to be outside doing any dyeing, because by 9 or 10 a.m., we're already looking at temperatures in the high 30s or high 90s, depending on Celsius, Fahrenheit. And so it can, in May these days, it can get up into the hundreds Fahrenheit and the 40s Celsius. So it's too hot. It's too hot to be out there and dyeing fabric. And so, yeah, I made myself really sick this one time. And so I don't do that anymore in the summer. Oh, yes. Oh, my gosh. Oh, okay. So Beth says, I watch a channel called Chem Knits where she dyes yarn. Wool seems to be a great dye stuff as well. Yes, wool really wants to dye, or be dyed rather. And I think also one of the things about this is some of these fibers, right? We've been using them for millennia, and human beings have been dyeing them for millennia. And so there's been a kind of learning the dyeing process with these fibers. And so I think there's been a bit of synergy that has led to having a really good way of dyeing things like wool and silk that works really well for those fibers. But keep in mind that I'm just like a journeyman dyist. I'm not an expert. I'm knowledgeable. I'm more than a beginner, but there are many, many people who know much more than I do about dyeing. Yeah, no, I agree with this. Beth says there's also probably a reason why you see hand painted silk, but not other fabrics. Yes, silk lends itself to hand painting. Um, oh my gosh, Cheshire says, I can't wait to be in Arizona on Thursday. It's so freaking cold where they are at. Listen, okay, so right now it got up to 92 degrees Fahrenheit today during the height of the day. So that was the high, but it's getting down into the 50s in the sort of middle of the night. So around midnight, 1 a.m. it's in the 50s, so you still need a bit of a wrap at night, but during the daytimes, like, I'm still wearing my summer frocks for the daytime weather right now, so layers are everything. The one challenge I think we have here is that the air conditioning can be quite strong, and so sometimes you need a sweater on the inside of places because the air conditioning is so strong that makes you cold. So what a problem to be having, but there we are. But yeah, the weather's significantly warmer than what you're experiencing, I suspect. It's warmer than I'd like it to be. It's actually a bit unseasonable for here. Not that it would be very cold, but it used to get, I'd say used to get cooler. All right. Yes, Joanne says, I've read Dyers with the first chemist. Yes, Dyers, absolutely. They're essential for, the history of chemistry. And they discovered so many things. And things like, one of my favorite things about the aniline dyes, which were the first synthetic dyes in the 19th century, and are kind of messy because they weren't necessarily the safest thing. Certainly, Shields green off gases into arsenic gas, which is very bad for humans. So there's some challenges there, but the man who discovered the aniline dyes was actually a chemist who was looking for a treatment for malaria, and instead he ended up with synthetic dyes. And I think that's just kind of wild bit of history. And also I'm a little bit obsessed with the synthetic dyes of the 19th century because of their deadly history, as it were, and because it sort of reminds everyone that our comrades of the 19th century were really into color. Like, they loved color so much, and bright color, wild colors, eye-searing colors. They were not necessarily wearing a lot of brown and gray all the time. Oh my gosh, high of 54. It currently is 52, feels like 46, and is raining. Like, look, that sounds amazing to me, because I'm like tired of being hot. I'm certain if I was there all the time, I would be tired of being cold and damp. But yes, our November is very mild. So I will probably spend most of the winter here in short sleeves and maybe a sweater at night. So we don't get proper winter usually. We do have mountains, so we can go up and like experience winter up there. But yeah, it's usually stays quite mild. And when we have our more traditional weather, we get our cold, damp in January. That's our sort of second rainy season of the year. Not that we've been getting that much lately, though. So fingers crossed. I'd love to get a rainy season in January. Makes a big difference for the rest of the year. Oh yeah, Bess says it's pretty new here, so it's still nice. But come January, we will be miserable about it. Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh. Cheshire says there's a person on the Clock app, the TikTok, that paints with vintage and deadly paints. That's that's intense. But like also I know some of those very toxic paints are beautiful colors. I wonder, do they use a respirator? Do they use a mask? How do they protect themselves? I know some of them, they're only poisonous if you ingest them or get them on your skin. But also, there are lots of famous stories of artists like making themselves mad or accidentally poisoning themselves with their own paint. So I don't know how true those stories are, but they are stories that I have read in books about the past. I'm still going. I'm still stitching. I'm about halfway. At the halfway point, I have to remind myself that I need to take my stitches the same length I've been taking them. Now is not the time to start making my stitches bigger. I must have self restraint. Oh my gosh. All right. They use full PPE, mask, respirator, protective eyewear, gloves, full coveralls. That's good. I don't know what it says about me that my first reaction was, what are they doing to stay safe? Maybe that's because I have spent so much time in the dying space that I'm like, oh no, you can absolutely poison yourself. You must be careful. Although I'm not the steampunk lady scientist who can tell you all of the science about the toxic tool bench and help you protect yourself. But I've learned something, and I've learned certainly to be careful. So, the last time I did a big batch of dyeing, I had a hole in my glove that I didn't know about, and so I got a bunch of dye all over my hands and like temporarily dyed my hands. Not ideal. I didn't have a terrible reaction, but it did make me very itchy. And I'm glad that at this point in my life, I'm not intending to pass on my genes to anyone because who knows what I ingested into my endocrine system doing that. But in general, I wear gloves and usually some thick clothing. I usually dress all in black when I'm dyeing because that way, if I get dye spatter on my garments, they're not ruined. Sometimes I wear a very large, very thick apron made out of canvas. It's my dyeing apron, and it looks like I've been slaughtering Muppets because it's covered in all sorts of like splashes of wild color from my years of dyeing whilst wearing it. So it's very gory looking, but in like Technicolor. It's a great apron though. And I used to wear really long gauntlet style gloves for dyeing, but these days I wear usually neoprene gloves. They're a bit easier for me to manipulate things and still keep my hands protected from the dye. I found that the thick gloves were great for protecting me from the heat of the dye bath, but that I was like, I lost a lot of dexterity. So I'd have different kinds of accidents because of the thickness of the rubber. So, trying to find a middle ground that's both protective and allows me to be more careful as I'm working with the fabric. So when I was dyeing this, I needed to pull the fabric out of the dye bath um, very early out of the purple so it didn't get too dark, and then prepare it for going into the blue dye bath. And I hadn't thought about how hot the fabric would be. And I was sort of used to handling my hot fabrics with these thicker gloves. And there's definitely some moments that of me just like dropping the fabric onto a clean surface and like blowing on my hands because I could really feel the heat through my gloves. Um, that was not the most sensible thing I've ever done, but I would handle it differently, which is why I think I'd go back to the other method I used for doing my ombre, because that didn't require me to like handle the hot fabric as much. I was able to like finish dyeing, process it, let it cool, and then go and do the next color range. Kind of a wild thing doing the ombre dyeing. It's very different from the normal dyeing I do. I'm still trying not to have really streaky, patchy dye where there's a bunch of white showing through. But if it's not like perfectly even, if some of the other color is showing through, that's like part of the magic of the ombre. So ooh, tightly woven fabric sleeves with fitted cuffs with tight gloves over top. You can also wear cotton gloves under your stretchy ones as glove liners. Ooh, that's really good advice. Thank you, Bess. Um, can I tell you work in a lab? Yes, absolutely. At this point, I'm like, that is somebody who knows what they're doing around chemicals and doesn't want to poison themselves. That's like some good, solid scientific recommendations. So thank you. Um, Yes, I try. I try to be conscientious, but I definitely learn more all the time about working with these chemicals. So I know I got some eye-opening information about E6000 recently. So I knew it was toxic. I knew you should not use it indoors because it's very bad to inhale it. And if you are working indoors, it should be very well ventilated and you should probably be wearing a respirator. But I normally try and use it out of doors, although I was told I probably should still use a respirator or wear a mask when I'm working with it out of doors. And it's really important to not touch it or get it on your skin. And this was not something I knew until extremely like the last couple of months. I think we talked about it in the Discord. And I was like, oh no, I've definitely gotten this all over my hands before. I've definitely touched it. I haven't like coated my skin in E6000 because I don't want to, stick myself to things. But I've definitely gotten it on my skin before. And I just like, washed it off when I was done. I wasn't too worried about it. And now I'm like, oh, I think I will work on those rare occasions that I work with it. I think I'll be using gloves from now on and, continuing to use it as less as possible. Best as respirator required when using powders. Once they are in solution, the respirator is less necessary. So this is good to know for people doing hand dyeing because a lot of the dyes come in powdered form. And when you are putting them into water, you are like dealing with that powder until it's blended, and it really can go everywhere. And you don't know, like the dyes these days, I think for home use endeavor not to be super toxic, but some of them have some things in them you don't really want to be ingesting. Um, so you don't want to be breathing it in either. It's why I do prefer dyeing in the winter months, because once I put on all this kit, like a mask and gloves, an apron, and things to do dyeing in, I'm so hot. I'm so hot. And doing that in the summer months is just miserable. Yeah, no, the E6000, as Bess points out, is like it's the fumes, it's definitely off gassing some things you don't want in your body. And it's the toxicity of that is well known. My understanding is that even the low smell version is still pretty toxic, so you should just use the same. All right, we're down to this much. So, whilst we've been talking about chemicals and dyeing, this is what I've done. So, about 31 inches of fabric stitched to give you a sense of my speed. And I'm very happy. Honestly, this side that I did by hand rolling rather than pressing up one edge and then rolling it has come together much better than the side I did by pressing and then rolling. So if you're working with Habitai, that is one thing I've learned and I share to you. And it's not that hard to like finger roll over 1/8 of an inch. I do think it helps that I've been sewing for long enough that I can eyeball 1/8 of an inch. So I'm not like sitting here with a ruler and measuring as I go. Kind of a rule of thumb situation. So some people will actually put little marks on the side of their thumb with a pen to help them use a handy dandy, quick and easy measurement as they stitch as a reference, so they are not having to put down their sewing and pick up a ruler or a tape measure or what have you in order to check things every, inch or two. But just like I do with the sewing machine, I'd say I'm eyeballing a place on my finger that I just use over and over again as my guide. Then as I go and it's rolling, I also kind of stretch it out a little bit as I work to sort of counteract the desire of the fabric to bunch up. Overall, while this is a bit fussy and while it definitely takes longer than the 10 minutes it would take to sew by machine, because I think most sewing machines would actually eat up this very delicate fabric if you were trying to run it through a rolled hem foot. This is a better approach. A very sharp needle, good light, reasonably good light, and a little thread lubricant are going a long way to making this go faster and be a bit of a smoother project. So I'm very grateful for that, because when I made the decision that I was going to do this rolled hem by hand, I really thought that I had signed myself up for a lot of sleepless nights trying to get it finished. And I had really intended to do the whole thing by machine, so I hadn't really left myself enough time to do that amount of labor and be functional. So I'm super delighted that it's going so smoothly. All right. Now, when last we chatted about sewing during our crafternoon on Discord, we got into talking a bit about marching band and musical things of that nature, because a number of you are veteran members of marching bands from your youth. And I mentioned that the school that is very close to me has an incredible marching band, award-winning, and they rehearse all the time. Normally, they are not rehearsing on a Tuesday night at this time of night, but they are going gangbusters. I can hear them in the background. I don't know if you can hear them, but there's been a lot of cheering and very lively brass. So good for them. I hope they're having a good rehearsal, because they are working so hard. I'm also very glad that they're good, because I get sort of ringside seats to all of their rehearsals all year. Oh my gosh. They're doing a setting of The Sound of Silence by Simon and Garfunkel. What an interesting option for a marching band. And yes, Bess, you are absolutely hearing some drums in the background. My goodness, the drum corps is very, very noticeable. They are going at it. Yeah, no. They are rehearsing so hard. It's not always immediately obvious what the thing is they're playing, especially if it's not a song I know. But that one, I was like, wait a minute, that's Simon and Garfunkel. I don't think I've ever heard The Sound of Silence as a marching band number, but like, good on them. It does seem a little bit sad for a marching band number, but also I went to opera school and everything we did was sad. So what do I know? So Cheshire says, I was an orchestra kid, definitely not a fan of cardio, and band does a lot of cardio. Oh my gosh, this was part of the discussion on Saturday, that band is definitely a sport that you work so hard physically, as well as playing your instrument and having to be on tune and know all of your music and memorize all of this music and notes and the arrangements and all of that. You also have to be like carrying your instrument, moving in rhythm, moving together with everyone, and sometimes running around the field with a 43-pound tuba. My heavens, madness. And yes, Beth says, it's wild what songs the band leaders will turn into marching tunes. It really is. And I know that much of modern popular music from the 20th century forward, but even in the 19th century, was in 4/4 time, continues to be in 4/4 time, which is works out very nicely for marching. It's still wild to me. The kinds of songs that get set, and this is particularly like, oh, The Sound of Silence. What an interesting choice for a marching band, which is not a particularly quiet experience. Not a lot of pianissimo there. That's all right. It's very pretty. Sounds good, but it really did take me a minute to go, oh my heavens, that's what that is. All right, well, good on you, marching band. They're very talented young people. So close. I'm so close. I'm almost done. I'm so happy. I will be happy when I have finished this. I will be even happier when I've handed it off to go to my friend so that she may enjoy it just in time to do very little against any sort of cold weather. Although silk is wonderfully insulating, this is a very thin piece of silk. It's not going to like really keep anyone that warm. Is fabulous though. All right, I have like 4 inches left. So happy. I do hope, as we're chatting, that if nothing else, this has sort of demystified doing a rolled hem and is giving you maybe a little bit of reassurance that it's very doable and that there are lots of ways to do a rolled hem. Now, am I going to do 120 inches of hem this way? Generally speaking, no. Am I going to do the edge of like a ruffle or flounce on a bustle dress that's like 300 some odd inches long when all's said and done? Absolutely not. My heavens, no. But for something like this, something short and delicate and special, a veil, like if you're doing some sort of sheer veil for a hat, for instance, I do love a veil. So, well, if you're doing a silk scarf, it's a wonderful treatment. And for the most part, I'm not having any hand strain because it's not very hard to make these stitches. I also have a lot of practice doing hand sewing. So I've got, I think, kind of good ergonomics about how I hold my needle and I hold my hand position when I'm sewing. And some of that is just practice because you have to find what works for your hand and doesn't cause you pain with your stitching. Although there are some good guides about holding your needle, holding your fabric so you're not working harder than you need to be. I'm almost done. About 2 inches to go. So excited. The goal here is not, again, to like lengthen my stitches because I'm near the end. The temptation is always grave. I'm making my stitches, I'd say about 1/4 of an inch apart. So they're not super close together. Just enough to hold everything where it needs to be. So excited. Not the hand strain. Absolutely. We don't want hand strain. Also, look, the biggest thing is I don't want hand strain in my fingers, but also like wrist position. I'm trying not to give myself repetitive stress injuries from sewing because I want to have many, many years of sewing left in my hands. And I do all of these like fussy things like hat making that require quite a bit of hand sewing. And so I'm like very conscientious of that. And as Cheshire says, hand ergonomics are are best for longevity. Absolutely true. But here I come. Oh, I'm down to the end, and I'm just going to like pull my threads. Oh, this is very satisfying. Look at that. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. I'm very happy. And look, I feel a little bit awkward talking about the beauty of my own work, but I do love how that turned out. I'm very happy with my decision, and I feel like I'm going to give my friend a really beautiful gift, all of which makes me extremely happy. And now I'm just knotting off my thread by doing a little stitched knot to hold everything in place. And then I'll go and give everything a nice little press. And once it's all pressed and beautiful, I'll definitely post pictures of it in Discord and on Patreon. It won't get posted to social media in general, and you're only seeing a smidge of it here until after my friend receives it as a gift, because I want her to be surprised. So, but I'm very pleased with how that rolled hem turned out. You can see some more detail here on the light colored bit. So, voila. So I'm 2 sides done. Technically, I could be done there because what remains is the selvage. But if I'm very thoughtful, I'll go in and do the selvage edge too, so it's matching all the way around. So I've probably got about 2 to 3 hours more work on this particular project, which is not terrible. But I'm not going to torment you with more hand sewing tonight. This has been wonderful, everyone. Thank you so much for spending the evening with me. We do have the same schedule unless you live in Arizona, in which case everything is now an hour later. So it did take me a moment this evening to remember myself that things started an hour later, and I had a bit of extra time to get ready and to prepare myself, which is very nice. So thank you. My gosh, for the wonderful company tonight, and also for the great conversation about things like chemistry and being safe with your tools and dyeing and what works and what doesn't, and also avocados, because we love avocados here as much as we love our tea. And also, look, please enjoy my beautiful teacup courtesy of Phyllis. I love this teacup. It's my new favorite. It's covered in cats, and it has like a little row of tea cups and tea bags on the inside edge. It's so charming, and it's a perfect size, big enough to be a solid cup of tea, not so large that the tea goes cold before I'm done drinking it. So that's great. And yes, I do have more hand torture in my future. I'm taking a break for now to go make some dinner and work on some other things. So, my darlings, thank you so much for your wonderful company. For those I will see at TusCon, I'm so excited to see you. Thank you for joining us for our adventures. I promise that the weather will be pretty decent whilst you're here. So that's very exciting. And we have lots of fun programming at the convention, and outside programming, we shall have some shenanigans. Although on Saturday, I just posted our schedule today. And if you look at that, you'll see that my Saturday is booked pretty much from noon until 9 p.m. So please bring me a granola bar if you see me. You'll only see me at events on Saturday. I'm pretty sure it's going to be so crazy. But Friday and Sunday are much more reasonable schedule wise, and so we shall have a lovely time. In the meantime, my darlings, especially for those of you whom I will not get to see in person this coming weekend, please remember to take very good care of yourselves, to treasure yourselves as I treasure you, to wash your hands, get your boosters and vaccines. Eat an avocado. You deserve it. Have the good cup of tea and just do something kind for yourself, because if you do not take care of yourselves, then we cannot have tea together. And if I cannot have tea with you, then I have to haunt you like an enraged cat, and nobody wants that. Good night, everyone. Cheers.